Hello guys and welcome to another video. We are in Assetto Corsa. This time it is a little bit of older content that I had recorded when I was practicing and racing a lot in World Sim series. One of the most noticeable differences is that I was using my previous DD1 unit with the BMW GT3 steering wheel that I ended up selling when I got the Formula wheel. After having qualified first, my start was not so good because I was sliding a little bit too much on my rear tires, so I ended up losing a few positions. I was temporarily in 4th position and got back to 3rd really quickly. This was a little bit of a really bad brake check, or I don't know, I was just not expecting. But then in qualifying I had a little bit much stronger pace than the other guys, so I should have been more careful and avoided that damage on the front of my car. It's always a huge pity for me that not many people join these really long endurance races. Well, this race for an online platform like World Sim Series might be one of the longest, around 1 hour. I'm not sure if usually there are 2-hour races, but a 1-hour race I think it could be accessible for more people to join. And you also get a mandatory pit stop. Usually you do 2 stints of 30 minutes during the race. This track in particular is very fun for me in endurance races because it's full of bumps, you have lots of different kinds of corners, and with a pretty strong force feedback you really feel a lot of the road texture, especially in Assetto Corsa. At the same time it becomes almost like a arm and forearm workout just to be able to hold the steering wheel in a straight line. Here I wasn't sure if I was going to go for the move, but I started too far back, so it's better to be a little bit more patient and not waste the race, not throw the race away. I had this video to edit in the oven for quite some time because it's a little bit of a longer race and a longer video. Of course I'm not going to put the full length here, but it's always a little bit more daunting to edit and work on such a long video. At the same time, it's always nostalgic for me to have some video with my old equipment, my previous steering wheel and my previous cockpit as well. I was very tempted to sell by a very interested buyer, and I ended up selling this steering wheel, but I do miss having a steering wheel like this one, a round one. It's always fun, and well, eventually I might get another one in the future. And here I'm going finally for the overtake move for the lead. This was a little bit annoying because I had qualified first, but then I lost positions in the start of the race. I knew I could go faster and I knew I had a little bit more pace, so being behind someone would be delaying my own race and my own lap times. So it was better for me to try to get the overtake done as quickly as possible, but safely of course. And now I'm just going to cruise and start focusing on things that usually we only focus on endurance races, like the tire wear, the fuel consumption, how the car characteristics start to change during the race because the car becomes lighter with less fuel, but at the same time the tires start to wear out, and depending on how aggressive or not you're driving, how fast you are going, you might get different performance out of the tires and overall throughout the race. Now it's the time where the endurance races start to get to that point where everything is settling in. I might start accelerating the footage as well.
Sector 1 time is good. The gap to Stefan behind is now 2.4. The tyres are cold, watch out.
One of the mistakes from my driving that I ended up only learning later on after many of these races was that I usually lean too much on the rear tires of the car. Usually I have a pretty loose setup and I could be leaning a little bit more on the front tires and wearing a bit more evenly the tires on the car. It's just one of those little things that we end up learning with experience, of course.
Got a bit of tyre wear out on all your tyres. Sector 1 time's okay.
By now I was starting to pull away from the cars behind. At this moment my faster pace was providing me with a little nice buffer, so I could relax a little bit.
It's the fastest lap of the race. The lap time was 1:53.6. 62 time was quick.
I was having faster lap times, I was having quicker sectors, so my spotter was telling me everything nice that I wanted to hear. I have to commend respect to the guys that were behind me, because they were almost keeping up with the pace and they were not too slow after all, so I was a little bit on my toes. I was a little bit careful because any big mistake could mean I would lose the race. It could be difficult for me to catch up back to them if I damaged the car or if I had any big shock.
Stefan behind is now 1.1 seconds. The lap time was at 1:54.4. Sector 2 and 3 are pretty good. Sector 1 is 0.3 off the pace. Sector 1 is quick. The gap to Stefan behind is now 6.5 seconds.
I was still pulling away from the guy behind, which was really nice. It meant that my pace for the race was safe. At this point I was not risking too much. I believe I was just trying to do a clean stint from the beginning to the end.
Fastest lap now was at 1:53.4. Your times are good in all 3 sectors.
This last lap I did ended up being one of the fastest laps of the race and pretty close to my personal best in this particular race. Looking at the tires, I can see that I'm wearing a little bit more the rear tires than the front tires. This is one of the reasons on an oversteer and a loose setup, is that sometimes we need to be very careful with the rear tires. And here I was not really pushing as much grip as I could on my front tires.
Sector 1 time's okay. The gap to Stefan behind is now 7.2.
Regarding this car, one of the things that can be a little bit annoying is that the brakes are always squealing a little bit too loud. I usually like to hear the tires a little bit better, and I try to have the other volumes a little bit lower so that the tires sound a little bit higher. It's always one of those things that helps in sim racing, because we are lacking so many different things like G-forces and other forms of information that we get in a real car. And usually listening to the tires can always help a little bit.
That lap time was 1:53.4. The times are good in all 3 sectors.
Here I'm arriving at a slower class car and soon I'll be overtaking him. Usually on endurance races we enjoy having different class cars because that provides a little bit of action. I was honking my horn as a form of saying thank you because he moved to the right side. That shows some nice racecraft and maturity. It's always very neat when we don't mess up each other's races, especially when driving different classes and different paces. Here I'm quickly arriving at the back of another GT3 car, and this time I'm going to think a little bit more on how to overtake him quickly. I don't want to waste too much time behind him. This guy is definitely faster than the other guy, and because of that I might be stuck on some of the turns. So if I'm able to overtake him without much fuss, I ended up doing an easy overtake, which was ideal for me. I'm not sure how the other drivers behind me in my class are going to deal with traffic, but if I waste too much time behind traffic and they don't waste that much time, I end up losing a little bit of my current advantage. Usually in endurance racing and multi-class racing, if the race is longer, it's always nice to really think about what we are doing, to actually think about our strategies, and as a driver you're always trying to get an advantage everywhere we can. Eventually I'll have to do a pit stop, and we are starting to get closer to the middle of the race, so it will be the end of the first stint.
Sector 2 is 0.8 off the pace. Okay, Carlos, you've used half your fuel. The gap to Stefan behind is increasing. It's now 8.4. You've just done 1:54.6.
This part of the race is pretty uneventful. I'm pulling away from the guys behind, but our pace overall is going down. Every driver is starting to get a little bit worn out tires. At the same time, I'm getting curious about how the pit stops will pan out, so we'll have to pit kinda soon and see how things will go from there.
Sector 1 time is good.
Eventually, after we getting our tires worn out, we end up having a few brown flag moments where I'm almost losing the rear end of the car because the rear tires have been wearing out a little bit faster than the front ones. There are some big oversteer moments where the rear end of the car is coming very loose. Luckily, I'm able to correct pretty quickly thanks to my direct drive. The DPi class cars are very interesting because they do have quite a bit of downforce and quite a bit of power as well, but they are not crazy fast or crazy hard to drive. At the same time, their electronics are a little bit simple, and you don't have energy systems, so you don't worry about MGUK, you don't worry about ERS or KERS, all those systems where you use kinetic energy and you have an electric motor to deploy that X-ray energy. Here you have a raw car and you just drive, it's a raw driving experience. Some prototypes are like that and they end up being quite nice to drive, especially if you don't have a crazy steering wheel with lots of buttons, you don't have a button box, you don't have a keyboard nearby to control everything. These cars end up being a little bit simpler, you just focus on the driving. Other cars like the LMDH, they are fun to drive, but of course these modern Le Mans cars, they do have lots of electronic systems and you have other things to worry about to control and deploy the electronic energy. It's a nice change of pace to have all sorts of different prototypes and you can choose whatever class you enjoy the most.
Sector 1 time is good.
Once again we are approaching another GT3 car from the slower class, and this time I'm thinking that I might want to go for an overtake. This guy was very nice because he gave me the outside line and I was able to do a really fast braking zone and just almost take that corner normally as if that guy was not even on the track. So kudos to that guy that was able to let me overtake him quite easily and not affect my pace in any way, shape or form. Sadly, we have a yellow flag here. I think this was going to be a lapped car, but that guy went off the track. I was trying to look at him and see what was going on with him, but I ended up focusing more on my own race. Here I have a massive lockup. My tires are getting a bit worn out and it's started to get the grip that I want.
Very little fuel left in this lap. Box this lap.
I'm finally running out of fuel. I could have went for the pits a little bit earlier, but I was trying to waste all the fuel that I had because I was in a little bit of an advantage position, and so now I could wear these tires for a little bit longer, at least 1 or 2 minutes more in the first stint. So my second and last stint will be around 27 minutes, and so maybe the tires will not be getting worn out as much on the second stint as they were on the first stint. I will be trying to avoid lockups and probably just take a little bit better care of the tires, just to be safe and have some extra pace by the end of the race. So if I really need to push, for some reason, if I fall behind during the pit stops, this GT3 overtake maybe cost me a little bit of time, but I had to be careful. Eventually the guy moved away from my line, so it ended up being okay, we avoided contact and everything, but still not the ideal place for me to do this kind of overtake, but we have these things in endurance racing.
Okay, Carlos, very little fuel left in this lap, box this lap.
My radio spotter race engineer is always very nice to listen to. because sometimes you can get distracted with the race or just pondering and thinking about other things, but he keeps reminding me that I need to box this lap. This is just a nice way to avoid messing up the race. So here for the pit stop I do need to activate the pit limiter before the entrance, because as you can see those warnings there, I do have a speed warning. This is an add-on, a third-party app that we install into Assetto Corsa for online races. This is called Real Penalty, and this will detect track cuts, and it will detect if you enter the pits with too much speed. Here you can see on the pit menu that I am asking for repairs. This is because I had damage on the beginning of the race and now I need that damage fixed. The pit stop is going to be a bit longer, but it is because of the refueling of the car. I think we are spending a ton of fuel. This car spends a lot of fuel and it's a pretty long refueling time. It looks like we are going to temporarily be in second place because the guy in front of us didn't go to the pits yet, but if he doesn't go to the pits anytime during this race he will be disqualified, so he will end up being forced to go to the pits, or we will inherit first place anyway. Not too worried about that. Now I can focus on a little bit more clean driving compared to the first thing, and maybe my muscle memory is a little bit more trained and nuanced. At the same time, with these long races we end up getting a little bit tired, and keeping focus to actually perform well and keep a good performance throughout the whole race is always a nice challenge. As we go across the start-finish line we get first place because the guy in second place was doing his mandatory pit stop. So everything is back where it was before, and now I'm going to see how far behind he is. And I'm going to notice if he actually got closer to me with the pit stops or not. Because I do remember that I had to repair some damage. I had a pretty long refueling session, so let's see. I think the guy is a bit closer to me than what he was before we went to the pits.
Sector 1 time's okay. Moving out to Stefan, behind is increasing. It's now 6.9 seconds.
So here I'm going to do the fastest lap of the race, and because of that I'm going to leave the full length of this lap available to be able to be seen in this video.
This is great. Come on, keep nailing those exits. You're now in the lead.
I do have a shorter video on my YouTube channel where I display my absolute fastest lap for this car and track combo. I think I'm doing that with slicks, and so it's in ideal conditions as well, so I can do a pretty quick lap time. It's a bit tricky to avoid locking up, but at the same time these cars, you can brake very hard in a straight line and you don't need to trail brake too much in many situations. Sometimes just a little bit, but these cars do have a lot of rotation naturally. With the setup that I'm using, they do rotate nicely. Some cars do have a default setup that is a little bit unruly, a little bit hard to get around. I think that with my setup the car even becomes a little bit less oversteery than what it has as the default setup by nature. So usually the default setup is insanely oversteery, and people when they pick up this car they make it just a little bit less oversteery, a little bit easier to control. My first feedback was really high. Because of that you can see lots of shaking, especially on the fast sections or on sections where we have a lot of downforce. The steering wheel becomes very heavy, and also I feel a lot of the suspension. For me this is a really nice and fun challenge. It feels like you really need to use your arms to drive, a little bit like drivers used to do when driving old and vintage race cars. And at the same time, because the force feedback is so strong, you actually feel a lot more things, and lots of small nuances come through a lot stronger in the force feedback.
The guy behind has just done a 153.9.
The guy behind was actually picking up his pace and was also doing some pretty quick lap times in this race. Comparing to me, he was not that slow, so I ended up having to be really focused throughout the whole race, because if I didn't pay enough attention, I could lose this race and become at least second place and lose first place to him.
You're a 10th off in sector 1. Clear out to Stefan behind us now, 7.9 seconds. Carlos, 15 minutes left, that's 15 minutes. Good stuff, mate, this is fucking excellent.
Here I'm starting to notice some traffic, but this could become a problem because this car is the same class as my car, so I'm fighting another DPi car. Of course I'm lapping him and he might be getting a blue flag. I'm not sure if real penalty will penalize him for not respecting the blue flag, but this guy seems to be struggling a little bit more than everyone else to control his DPi car, and so this can be a little bit of a problem. I don't really want to be too aggressive with the push, because, you know, I'm very close to the end of the race. There is no point in wasting a race that lasted for almost 1 hour. Eventually this guy was pretty cool and found a safe place to let me through. I took that opportunity to safely overtake. In these cases I try to show some respect to the slower drivers, and I try to not be overly aggressive. As you can see, I've been doing a little bit lower lap times in my second stint. I'm not pulling the same advantage that I was pulling every lap, not gaining the same distance that I was gaining before, but my tires are all still green, and so I'm saving the tires a lot more in this stint than what I was saving in the first stint. Here I'm not having those crazy moments that I was having before, and if I want to push now, I can push a little bit better, closer to the end of the race and not worry too much. My car is getting lighter, so with less fuel right before the end of the race, and my tires are not too worn out. I'm coming into traffic once again. I'm getting close to another GT3 car, so a slower class. The overtake should be easy and we should have avoided contact, but this guy was unaware that I was on the inside and I was already overtaking, so he ended up damaging the front of my car. Not ideal, of course. This guy was not actually paying too much attention, maybe, because on the first time I overtook him we didn't have any incident like this. There is not much I can do really in this kind of situation. It's like I can just keep wasting time behind a slower class car or a slower driver, or I can try to go for the move where I think it's the right place, but if they are unaware that I'm there, if they end up driving into me, that's not something that I can avoid, especially when I'm least expecting that. So I just have to deal with it and just roll with it and try to do my best moving forward. Now we are already at the last 10 minutes of the race, so the other 50 minutes have passed already, and I don't have any cars in front of me. I'm not sure if I'm going to have any more incidents or anything special happen again, anything going on, really. So maybe only if I had a really big shunt and I drove into the shadow realm or something like that. Other than that, I'm feeling a little bit more confident in these last few minutes that I was before the pit stop, for a few reasons. First off, I think that now I was able to save the tires a little bit better than the first time around, and also now this second time I'm already used to how these tires feel when they are really worn out and when the car is getting very low on fuel. So the feeling of driving the car with a lesser fuel load and with a little bit lesser grip is not something that comes as a big surprise to me anymore. I'm not getting those crazy oversteer moments anymore.
Nice one, Carlos. Great win. You deserve that today.
And we finally crossed the checkered flag. I ended up winning the race, of course. I was having the better pace, so it was expected. I just had to avoid any really big mistakes and enjoy the race. I hope you guys have enjoyed watching this race too, and that this inspires more people to actually do 1 hour endurance races, especially on World Sim Series, and just go for ranked races with penalty systems and actually have a little bit of fun. Don't forget to leave your comments, likes and subscribe to the channel if you want to watch more content. I end up uploading when I can, but it's always nice to get some feedback on the kind of content and videos that I'm putting out, and just have some interaction with other people that share the same passion.
Look out for the pit speed limit.
Thank you for watching and have a nice day. See you.